It's the SNL Hall of Fame podcast with your host, Jamie Dew, Chief Librarian Thomas Sena, and featuring Matt Ardill. And now, curator of the hall, Jamie Dew.
Hey, thanks so much, Nets. It's great to be here with you all. We've got a great show for you, so wipe those feet and get inside, because this is the SNL Hall of Fame podcast, a weekly affair where each week we take a deep dive into the career of a former cast member, host, musical guest, or writer and add them to the ballot for your consideration. Once the nominees have been announced, we turn to you, the listener, to vote for the most deserving and help determine who will be enshrined for perpetuity in the hall. My name is Jamie Dew. I am thrilled to be here with you. I hope you are doing well. Today we are going to focus on Seth Meyers in the SNL Hall of Fame, and we are going to talk about Seth Meyers in terms of his what he brought to the table in terms of writing. He was a head writer on the show. He worked behind the Weekend Update desk, and I feel that when he got behind the Weekend Update desk, he really found his footing in the show. Whereas for the seasons prior to that, where he was a repertory player, he never really clicked for me. But behind the Weekend Update desk, this guy was a tour de force. And make no mistake, he has my vote. Now, you may be wondering, how do you get access to vote? Well, January 10th, we will open the voting, and you can only vote if you're registered to vote. So please make sure to do that anywhere you find a link for the SNL Hall of Fame. Once you do that, you will get a ballot in your email that you can complete. The instructions will be there, but if you have any questions about any of that particular information that you might need, feel free to send me an email, jamie@snlhof.com. I would love to hear from you. You can also let us know how you think we're doing. And if you listen to the show, maybe send us a review. That would be pretty great. So today in Matt's Minutia Minute, we are talking about Seth Meyers. Talk to me a little bit about Seth Meyers. What have you got for us?
Yeah, I am actually super excited. He is one of my favorite writers. I love his body of work. Amazing guy, funny. He is 5'11", born December 28th, 1973. His first episode was season 27, September 19th, 2001. So that must have been a challenge for coming in as your first episode. But yeah, that was the year with Dratch, Jimmy Fallon, Will Ferrell, Tina Fey, Anna Gasteyer. So it was a great year. He was also starting with Amy Poehler, who he auditioned with, Maya Rudolph, Horatio Sands, and Dean Edwards, and Jeff Richard. His last season, February 1st, 2014, was again the modern golden era cast with like Adie Bryant, Kate McKinnon, Bobby Moynihan. So terrific cast there. He's done 13 seasons. He hosted October 13th, 2018. Until 2021, he was actually the longest running host the Weekend Update desk. He beat out Tina, but in 2021, Colin squeaked by him. He actually auditioned to do the desk in 2004, but lost out to Amy Poehler before they teamed up in 2006. He's currently the third longest running cast member after Daryl Hammond and, of course, Kenan Thompson. He did a cameo on the late night Weekend Update Summer Edition, and he's game for silly things. Like the last episode of Stefan on the Weekend Update desk, where basically Stefan is like, "You've never respected me. I'm getting married to somebody who treats me right," and runs off. And then you have him straight up graduate interrupting Stefan and Anderson Cooper's wedding, where he punches Anderson Cooper out. DJ Baby Bok Choy lets them get away. It is absolutely freaking insane.
I need to rewatch it.
It is hilarious. It is genuinely hilarious. But I think something that really is illustrated in that sketch. There's a slightly hot mic as it's cutting away. Bill Hader says to him, I really love you, man, as he's hugging him. And I think that speaks to the respect that Seth gives his writers and the performers that he works with, because you'll also see that in things like on his current show, The Late Show, where he's consistently elevating other voices like Michelle Wolf and Amber Ruffin and Jenny Hagel. Like, Amber has her own show now. Like, he gave up one of his nights to let her have her own show because she's so freaking funny. And honestly, it's one of the best late night shows on TV, Amber Ruffin's show. So I mean, he's respectful of the talent that he works with. He's been a lead writer. He started as story editor in 2004. He graduated up to being head writer, and like from 2006 until when he left. And it's just, some of the best comedy came out of that. The best Weekend Update desks were during his period in my mind. And he's just an amazing, funny guy. He's brought comedy around the world. He was a member of the Chicago Improv Company in Amsterdam, Boom Chicago, which, has people like Jordan Peele, Amber Ruffin, Ike Barinholtz, and his brother Josh, who are all members, doing improv, American-style improv in Amsterdam, which I think also gives him some of his gameness, because he's played to audiences who are not familiar. He's been willing to do silly things, and I think amazing writer and funny guy.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks so much, Matt. Let's throw it now to our friend Thomas and join his conversation with Sammy K, who is nominating Seth Meyers today in the Hall. Thomas?
Yes, Jamie, thank you so much. That's right. I am joined by Sammy K from the Saturday Night Network. He's one of the super fans that you've probably heard on the Super Fan Takeover on the Saturday Night Network, Mr. Sammy K. So first time here on the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. We are so happy to have Sammy join us. Sammy, thank you so much. How are you doing today?
Thomas, I'm doing really well. I'm really excited to be on the podcast tonight. I have only been on the Saturday Night Network as far as my podcasting career goes. So, exploring new waters tonight, being able to talk about someone who I'm a huge fan of, who I've been watching ever since I started watching SNL, and that is Seth Meyers. So someone who I think is definitely worthy for the SNL Hall of Fame, and I'm excited to get into that.
We always welcome people from other podcasts, SNL podcasts, podcast networks to join us. I think we're all one big happy family here in the SNL community. So it's wonderful to have you. And yes, you're right. We're talking about Seth Meyers today, and maybe in a different capacity than some people might expect right off the bat. We're talking about Seth Meyers as a writer and not a cast member. So a little bit of a different, maybe a shift of mindset when it comes to the SNL Hall of Fame, and taking a look at Seth Meyers' SNL career from a little different perspective than what people might be used to. We'll get into some of his update stuff and everything like that, but just to let it be known to the listener, we are talking about Seth Meyers and his candidacy as a writer on the show. But I do actually want to, because I think it makes sense to start talking about his SNL career as a cast member. So I do want to start there. He was hired for the show, season 27, back in 2001. He came in with Amy Poehler and some others. That was Will Ferrell's last season on the show. So there was some overlap with some of the greats there. So Sammy, as a viewer, as a super fan of the show, how do you view Seth Meyers as a cast member on Saturday Night Live?
So, Seth Meyers has had a very interesting career on SNL. He, has basically done everything. He was a cast member, he was a writer, he was a head writer, he was a Weekend Update anchor, and he eventually hosted. So he's done pretty much everything you can do besides be a musical guest on the show. But obviously, he got his start as a cast member. And, he was in a pretty strong crop of funny people. Like you said, it was Will Ferrell's last year. He joined with Amy Poehler. Down the line, Fred Armisen joins Will Forte. And, the story goes on. And in the episodes that I've gone back and watched during his time as a cast member, because when I started watching the show, he was already on Update. He's a solid sketch performer, but I don't think that's something that most people, when they think of SNL and Seth's career on the show, that's not the first thing that comes to mind. He had recurring sketches like the Needlers with Amy Poehler, and him and Amy had such a great rapport. And I think they had a very good relationship because they started on the show together and made it all the way on to Weekend Update together, a couple years down the line. So he did a lot of great work with her in sketches. He had a lot of spotlight during the 2004 presidential election where he played John Kerry. And, John Kerry's not the easiest person to imitate. He certainly looks like him, but, I think he does a solid job. So as far as a sketch performer goes, I don't think he would say that he is one of the greatest sketch comedians of all time to have graced Studio 8H, but that doesn't mean he isn't worthy for, all the praise we're going to be giving him today.
Yeah, when I've heard him talk about his time as a cast member, and he said when he joined the cast, as I mentioned, people like Will Ferrell, Rachel Dratch, Anna Gasteyer, Daryl Hammond, Tracy Morgan. I mean, there's like SNL royalty that he joined the cast with. And so Seth said that he knew that those cast members were better, but thought that he would get to their level at some point with more reps. He said, this is something that I have to learn. I might not be as good as Will Ferrell, but I'll be in that realm just with more experience. So then he said, when Bill Hader, Sudeikis, Andy Samberg, Fred Armisen, Will Forte, that whole crop of cast members joined, Seth was he said that he, quote, had a crisis of confidence when he saw them perform. He thought that he wasn't as good of a sketch performer as they were, and he said that he's like deeply jealous of how good they are as sketch performers. So, I mean, he would be the first one to say that as a cast member, he's probably not SNL Hall of Fame worthy. I think that's not a hot take. I mean, Seth Meyers as a cast member isn't a Hall of Fame worthy cast member, but I think just looking at his time there, you could start seeing seeds of just clever humor and some sketches that he was in. I'm thinking about, you had mentioned the Needlers.
So we've been thinking about having kids.
Nice pick on the wine, Sally.
Yeah, well, maybe next time, Dan, don't honk the horn every 30 seconds while I'm in the store.
All right, I'll go get another bottle.
Ow!
What?
You stepped on my foot!
Oh, then maybe we should call an ambulance, because that's what a noise a person makes when they break every bone in their foot.
You're embarrassing
Oh,
yourself.
I'm embarrassing myself?
Yes!
Can I talk to you in the kitchen, please?
Absolutely!
I mean, I don't get it. They obviously hate each other.
They've been like this since their wedding.
They were like this when they were dating.
We were there the night they met. It did not go well.
Oh my God, Jack, do something. They're gonna break our dishes.
Okay.
They're having sex.
And it was good performance, good rapport with he and Amy Poehler. I don't know if you remember the Michael Caine impression.
Yes.
that he did.
Yes.
Yeah, you do. So, well, yeah, how did you feel about him, like as Michael Caine and his rapport with like Jude Law in that sketch?
I mean, that's such a fun little gem that you forget about, and then you find it on YouTube or you're researching for a podcast about Seth Meyers, and you're like, oh yeah, what sketches is he really known for? And that's one that I watched in preparation for this, and he is actually throughout his career on SNL and then on Late Night, he is a decent to good impressionist, I'd say. And I think he goes about impressions knowing that he's not like a Bill Hader or, a James Austin Johnson or anything like that. And he has a lot of fun with it, but he gets it just close enough. And I think in this Michael Caine sketch, he certainly gets it just enough.
Hello, I'm Michael Caine.
And I'm Peter O'Toole.
And you're watching An Evening with Peter and Michael. Please enjoy a combined 200 years of acting excellence.
This man
has been in over 300 films. Hannah and Her Sisters.
Yes.
Ipcris File.
Yes.
Star Wars.
No.
Garfield.
No.
The Jigsaw Man.
Yes.
Sir Penny's Marshals, A League of Their Own.
Absolutely not.
And the first season of NYPD Blue.
David Caruso.
And Michael Caine's like, that's a fun impression to do, and not the hardest. I'm not going to do one today, but I've done Michael Caine in the past, and I think Seth, the performance is great. The rapport with Jude Law is a lot of fun, and such a bizarre concept for a sketch. Just the two of them. I forget, they're at like a Taco Bell or McDonald's or something like that doing
It's
a
a Taco
show.
Bell Pizza Hut kind of combo.
Obviously,
restaurant. Yeah.
Peak early 2000s fast food eatery.
Exactly.
But no, that one's a lot of fun, and surprised he never brought that one back when he hosted.
He also did like Top of the Morning 5 times, another recurring sketch and recurring characters. So in his time here, you could see maybe he wasn't the best on-screen sketch performer, though he was good and serviceable. There was even one of the seasons, I believe it was season 30, where it almost seemed like the show, they were lacking a star. So it almost seemed like they pushed him a little bit and maybe wanted him to kind of be front and center. Maybe it was his like audition to take over for the Will Ferrell type. I don't know. But there was that one season where Seth was in a lot of sketches.
Yeah.
And so in 2005, getting more into the writing aspect of his career, he was promoted to writing supervisor. So Lorne did see something when he was a cast member, even though he was actually hired solely as a cast member and not at all like a writer or as a writer. And as we know on the show, cast members write a lot for themselves. So if you're hired just as a cast member, it's honestly, you're doing double duty as a cast member and a writer, but he wasn't hired with the writer title. So that's what I find interesting, that during his work as a cast member, Lorne spotted that he had these writing chops. And so Lorne approached him and said, let's start getting you behind the scenes a little bit more. So 2005, promoted to writing supervisor. And by 2006, he became co-head writer with Tina Fey and Andrew Still. Quite the big jump from cast member to writing supervisor to co-head writer in the span of like 2 years. So I actually want to get into what the show was like around this time. We're talking seasons 30, 31, headed into 32. So before Seth became head writer in season 32, leading up to that, where do you think that the show was in terms of quality and tone and everything like that leading into that season?
Well, I think the show at that point was kind of in between two big eras. You're in between the Will Ferrell and the Molly Shannon era of the show, and obviously later on when Seth becomes head writer, you have the Bill Haders and Jason Sudeikis, and that's not to say that there wasn't great talent on the show at the time. Obviously Jimmy Fallon was on for a majority of that kind of run there in the early 2000s. Tina Fey and Amy were on Update once Jimmy leaves. But, as far as the tone of the show, they had to deal with everything that was going on around that time, politically, obviously, specifically with Seth. I mean, I know Seth and Amy's first show was fall 2001, which is when 9/11 happened. So everything with the Bush administration and losing Will Ferrell at the time and not having him for the Bush administration, I think there was a time where the show kind of lost its footing. And it's not really until Seth comes in to Update and as a head writer that we really see kind of what people consider the second golden era of the show, or one of the golden eras of the show with that cast. And I think a big part of that is the fact that he was a head writer. He's acts as a producer and was able to kind of take those talents and utilize everybody in a really good way. So
you said that, I think that was well stated, that the show kind of lost its footing after they lost people like Will Ferrell, Anna Gasteyer, Tracy Morgan. I think the show did lack a certain identity. And it was also, I don't know how old you were in 2004, 2005. I'm dating myself.
Yeah.
I was in my early 20s back then, so I was well aware of pop culture. It was a really weird time in pop culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Super weird. It was just a lot of disposable things were happening in pop culture. It was a time, even in comedy, where a lot of the like edgelord type of humor was really popular around 2004. A lot of mean-spirited kind of humor without a punchline. It was mean-spirited, but without a punchline. It was just, it's hard to place, but just I felt at the time that was a very weird time in pop culture and in the world. It was like post 9/11. There was a war going on. It was just very bizarre time just in pop culture and in the world. So I think SNL did not benefit from that. The show almost followed suit in a lot of ways, and they were searching for cast members who could really grab the reins of the show.
Absolutely.
So season 32 is when Seth Meyers takes control as head writer at SNL. And one of the things about Seth that I've heard him say, and something Lauren spotted, and see if you agree with this, and if it came across to you as the viewer. And Lauren said that Seth wrote really well for a lot of different voices. And I think that served him well as head writer, but knowing the cast around that time when Seth took over, I mean, how do you feel that maybe the overall writing with Seth's leadership, how do you think those cast members and those voices were written for and served starting in season 2 around that time, or 32 around that time?
I think around that time there was a certain alchemy that kind of occurred. And I think the show was facing a lot of challenges with, I believe there was a big budget cut that happened around like 2005, 2006. And that's when people like Chris Parnell and Horatio Sands were not renewed their contracts, like Rachel Dratch and stuff like that. So they had a bit of a smaller cast, but timing is everything, especially with a show like SNL where, people come and go. And it just so happened that when, a bunch of cast members left, Seth Meyers takes the reins and is able to take this cast with pretty much all relatively newcomers except for, Daryl Hammond, and utilize them in a really, really strong way. Everybody, it really felt like at that time, everybody was hitting. Everyone was able to have a recurring character or a segment on Update that let them showcase their specific talents and their voice. And I think that's something that a lot of people have spoken about Seth at the time, and something that Lauren saw in Seth is that he did a really good job as a head writer. The job is to take the assets you have in front of them and kind of use what they gave to Lauren and the producers in their audition. I think there's a specific quote I had written down here. Certain people are going to write a certain way, and as the head writer, you try to point them to what the show could use a little bit more of, or how to make their stuff a little bit more show-friendly. And I think that's something that Seth absolutely did with his cast. At that time, people like Andy Samberg giving him that kind of spotlight for the SNL digital shorts. Who knows if that is something that could have come about without someone like Seth in the head writer's chair. People like Kristen Wiig and Bill Hader. And, Lauren wants everyone to stay unique in the way that they were during their auditions. And I feel like Seth was really able to utilize that during his time as the head writer to make sure everyone's voice was representative of the type of comedy they were hired for.
Yeah, so on that cast in season 32, we're talking about Fred Armisen, who I think he's a chameleon in a lot of ways. He could play it really weird, really straight, big characters. I think that was brought out in him. Will Forte, who's known for weird type of humor, which I love. Will Forte is one of my personal favorite cast members in the show's history. His humor was able to shine. You mentioned Bill Hader. Daryl Hammond was the vet. He brought the best out in Amy Poehler, Maya Rudolph. Look at these names. Andy Samberg, Jason Sudeikis, Kenan Thompson, which is I find hilarious that he's still on the cast. Obviously, it was his 4th season. He had more tenure than maybe half the cast around that time in 2006. And Kristen Wiig. So just a who's who of cast members. And in some ways, maybe Seth was fortunate to have that kind of cast on the show when he was head writer, but I think it takes a lot of great leadership to bring stuff out in that cast. So I do want to get into his time on Weekend Update as well, because I feel like it's a performing role, but it's also a writing gig to me in a lot of ways. To me, Weekend Update is very much a writing gig. So I think when talking about Seth's candidacy in the SNL Hall of Fame as a writer, I think it's very appropriate to talk about Weekend Update. So in 2006, he started co-anchoring Weekend Update with Amy Poehler. So you, Sammy, what did you think of that pairing of Amy Poehler and Seth Meyers on Weekend Update?
I mean, that pairing was great because you could really tell that these were two people who had great admiration for each other and their kind of comedic voices. And, like I said before, they came onto the show together. And I think being able to do Update together was something that they both really appreciated. You could tell that, I think Seth has said in the past that like Amy was somebody that he was his kind of best friend on the show, who he loved working with the most. And I think that is something that certainly came out in their Update era, which was so short in hindsight. Amy Poehler kind of straddled two different Update eras, 2 years with Tina Fey, 2 years with Seth, and that was it, and made a big impact. And I think it's almost, as much as I enjoyed, Seth's entire tenure on Behind the Desk, it would have been nice to see them do that for a lot longer than 2 years, because I thought they just had a really good kind of back and forth. And the big thing that, people will remember from their time on Update together was really with Seth and Amy, which was a really notable cornerstone of not only that kind of Update pairing, but I think of that era of the show. And what I found to be really interesting was he did that segment 19 times on the show, and I think they only did it 5 times while Amy Poehler was a cast member. So it was something that,
wow.
And what I think is even crazier, that he only did it 3 times solo. So whether it was Amy coming in or doing it with Colin and Michael Che when he came to host, or even things I totally forgot about. He had Jerry Seinfeld come in for a Really with Seth. He had Kevin Hart come in. Kermit the Frog came in.
Really, Congress? Now cafeteria pizza qualifies as a vegetable? Cafeteria pizza barely qualifies as a pizza. It has the same nutritional value as the tray it's served on. And if pizza is a vegetable now, what's broccoli? Penicillin?
I mean, really? If pizza is a vegetable, what's a fruit salad? Twizzlers and a grape soda? Really?
Really?
But it all started with, obviously, Seth and Amy, and I think that was such a great segment, and something that when I think about their time together, I automatically think about that.
I think that was a marriage of two similar personalities that really worked. Sometimes you don't want to have two personalities that are too much alike, I think, in that setting, but it did work to me with Seth and Amy. And you mentioned the Really segment, and it was a bizarro point counterpoint in a way. Like with Point Counterpoint, with Jane Curtin and Dan Aykroyd, they were butting heads and almost arguing or whatever in a way. But with Really, I loved that Amy and Seth were teaming up.
Arizona State University this week decided not to give an honorary degree to President Barack Obama, who gave the commencement address at their graduation ceremony, claiming that he hasn't accomplished enough. That brings us to a segment we like to call Really with Seth and Amy. Really, Arizona State. You didn't want to give an honorary degree to President Barack Obama. You do realize half the people you gave regular degrees to were wearing flip-flops and hiding flasks. Don't get me wrong, you're a fine school. Princeton Review ranks you number 17 as a party school. As a school, you're 121st. If that bums you out, may I suggest you go party?
Really? And really, Arizona State, you might be overvaluing the worth of your degrees. Your acceptance rate is 95%. You're slightly more selective than the Burger King Kids Club. I mean, really? Well, were you worried that giving the degree to someone as underqualified as President Obama would tarnish the noble image of Sparky the Sun Devil?
So it was just them building off of one another's jokes and discontent and everything in that segment. So I just love that instead of this sort of manufactured headbutting, which worked with Dan and Jane. You got Amy and Seth where they were a true partnership, and just them kind of piling on this one topic just completely worked for me. I thought that was a wonderful pairing. In 2008, he started anchoring Update Solo, and Update Solo can be tricky, I think. I mean, obviously, you're not doing half the jokes anymore. The entire update's in your voice. So how do you think Seth did working solo on Update?
I mean, Seth was great as a solo Update person. I mean, like I said before, like would have been nice to have a couple more years with Amy. But I think for someone who, for his first couple years as a cast member, didn't really, wasn't able to make a huge mark or become that next Will Ferrell or whoever, on Update, he was able to get 10 minutes every week to tell jokes and kind of share his perspective on, what's in the headlines. And as a solo Update anchor, that what I'm about to say is probably even more important than if you were in a pair. Something that kind of lives or dies by your hosting could be, your interaction with the characters that come through that, through the side of the stage, all the great Weekend Update characters that he interacts with. And I thought the way that Seth interacted with characters was really, really great. There's a specific quote in the Live from New York book that comes to mind where they talk about, specifically Seth made a conscious effort to not play his Weekend Update anchor as frustrated with characters. He was quoted as saying, "Someone said to me that when I was frustrated with the characters, they were also frustrated with the characters. So I made a decision to be always delighted with whoever came out on Weekend Update, Stefan included." So every time Kristen Wiig comes in, or Bill Hader as Stefan, or Bobby Moynihan as Drunk Uncle, Seth brought this demeanor that was not annoyed like a lot of different Weekend Update anchors had been in the past with the characters that would come in. He really wanted them to succeed, and I think that made for an even better comedic back and forth. Making sure and I think there's another quote in the book that something goes along the lines of, in improv, you want the other person to win more. You want to support the people to make things even funnier. And I think you can say both on the Update desk and as a head writer, Seth definitely did that.
The Update anchor, when the Update character is on, is almost like a voice for the audience. The Update anchor is almost speaking for the audience in their interaction with the character, because we can't interact with the characters, but the Update anchor can. So I think that's that's really interesting. I had never heard that quote or knew that Seth had that approach with the Update characters, and really did see it with Stefan.
Stefan, we asked you here tonight to tell us about some New York summer fun spots. Mm-hmm. And then you came out here. I just want to recap what happened, because you came out here and then you told us things that sound like nightmares of a crystal meth addict. Accurate. It is accurate. But I have to say, Stefan, I know you honestly want people to have a good time, so I'm going to give you a pass. Yay, Stefan! Stefan!
Even if Seth sort of seemed frustrated with Stefan throughout their interaction, I love how Seth, especially at the beginning, liked to end his interactions with Stefan with just praising Stefan and mining whatever joy there was out of Stefan's Update piece, even though some of the whole bit was Seth having to steer Stefan back into a certain direction, kind of rein him in a little bit. But then you get that sweet ending where Seth's like, "I like that you were here. We're going to have you back," and all that. So that actually makes sense with seeing how he interacted with Stefan, that he would do that with other characters. With Bobby Moynihan's Anthony Crispino comes to mind. And now that I think about it, Seth would kind of gently nudge Anthony Crispino and correct him on his mistakes, but Seth was never really visibly too frustrated with the Update character.
And Seth, he wasn't like making them the butt of the joke. Like I said, like he wanted them to succeed. And because you were talking about Stefan, another quote came to mind from Bill Hader, and he said, "The first rule I learned in improv class was that you want to make the other person look good, and that's what Seth did better than anybody. Even when you had kind of a shitty Update, he would make you look good. It's so easy to play it angry, but he would never get angry. He thought, I invited these people to Weekend Update for a reason. I want this to work out." So that's from Bill Hader. And that is, especially if the Stefan relationship comes through, but with a lot of the characters that would come to his update, I think that's a running theme you would see.
Yeah, and that's a nice glimpse into that creative, almost genius mind of Seth Meyers, that kind of comedic genius. Like he has his approach, and he's not just winging it out there. He has his comedic values, I guess. I love that. It totally shines through in his work on Update. So he was by himself until 2013, and that's when we see Cecily Strong join the Update desk along with Seth Meyers. And I'm going to ask you your opinion, obviously, but rewatching these and doing research for this podcast, I had forgotten how much I enjoyed Cecily Strong as an Update anchor and how well she worked with Seth Meyers. She was really good on Update, and I think Seth brought a lot of that out in her at the beginning. I think Seth did a good job of making her feel comfortable. I think that was a really good pairing, and Cecily was a lot better than I think people even remember her being on Update.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I mean, even at the time, we all knew, it was announced in the press that this was not a pairing that was going to last forever. She joins the cast, or she joins the Update desk. I think it's her second year on the show, and joins the Update desk during Seth's last year on the show, where he leaves mid-season to host Late Night with Seth Meyers. And, it was a temporary pairing, and Colin Jost ended up being paired with her for the second half of that season. But, she is just lovely on the Update desk. She's really funny. For someone who joined a whole, basically 10 years after Seth joined the cast, Cecily joins the cast, to be able to have that pairing work, being from almost two different, he's not 30 years older than her, but from two different comedy generations, and to have that still work out, I think is, like you said, kind of a testament to Seth's ability to find what works best for a certain cast member as a head writer and as a producer, and kind of make it kind of click.
Yeah, I think their rapport was instantly great. I think they made a connection right away. They would have fun little asides during their Update segments where they would interact with each other.
O.J. Simpson was allegedly caught stealing cookies from a Nevada prison cafeteria on Thursday.
That's sad. I feel so bad for him.
You feel bad for O.J. Simpson?
Yeah, he's been through so much. Did you know his ex-wife was murdered?
Yeah, I did know that.
I mean, let the guy have a cookie, right?
Oh, we should move on.
You stay strong, Juice.
No, don't say that.
I think Seth did a really nice job of just shepherding Cecily through that process, because, she had to have been nervous. Everybody's nervous when they first go on the show and they go on Update. Colin Jost, honestly, one of the best Update people. He and Shay, I really enjoy them. But Jost was very nervous the first time he did Update. He laughs at himself about it now. But Cecily, she didn't show nerves too much. And I think that's because she had Seth Meyers sitting next to her, helping her along and giving her that confidence. And that speaks a lot, I think, to Seth and the type of voice and the type of mentor that he must have been for a lot of cast members, especially toward the end of his SNL tenure. Going back a little bit to his writing, have you seen the James Franco SNL documentary?
Yes, I have.
Scenes? Yeah, so I think that gives such a great glimpse into the behind the scenes process. Obviously, it's a behind the scenes documentary, but I think I was super impressed by Seth and what they showed of him throughout that documentary. I mean, what did you take away from watching that documentary as far as Seth and how he worked with other people on the show?
Well, to be honest, it's been a while since I've watched it, but from what I remember and from other quotes that I've read in preparation for this, it's cliche, but he has said, I had an open door policy. You let it be known to the cast that your door is always open. And that is something that created a really comfortable environment, it seemed like. There were headlines a couple of years ago after Taron Killam had left SNL, where he specifically calls out Seth Meyers as the point in which him leaving changed the show. He said, when Seth Meyers left the show, the dynamic changed quite a bit. he was the last person there who I witnessed really collaborate with Lorne as opposed to kind of do what Lorne says. And he literally said that SNL was a less happy place to work, and it was more competitive when Seth was gone. So you can probably speak on more to specifics of the documentary, but I'm sure that came across there as well as being able to take this cast and figure out how do we get them represented on the show and utilize their talents to the best as possible. Something that also comes to mind with his career as a head writer is his talk of kind of balancing his duties on Weekend Update and being a head writer. He basically said that he spent, a lot less time on Update than on other things than you would think. Like he would check in with the Update writers on Friday to see, kind of what kind of good shape they were in. But 80 to 85% of the work he did on the show was as a head writer, as acting as a producer. And that he said that being on Update was basically like his reward, that he was able to, be in front of people for 10 minutes every week and tell jokes. And that was the reward he got for shepherding all these people and, making sure the show turned out as good as it did during those years.
And you had talked about what a giving performer he was on Update as far as his interactions with the Update characters and the cast members in that capacity. He seemed like a very giving boss or very giving head writer as well. Like going back to that Franco documentary, you could see him helping Bill Hader tighten up a Vinny Vedecci sketch that he was doing with John Malkovich, and you can see Seth really giving good advice to Bill and giving him notes, and Bill just kind of taking it all in. He was workshopping punchlines with Kenan Thompson for an Update appearance. Kenan went on Update during that episode as Plaxico Burress, and you could see them hashing out punchlines, and Seth came up with a punchline. I forget exactly what he said, but then Kenan said, well, what if we say, let's find a doctor who takes cash? And Seth's like, that's perfect. So he was just totally like, Kenan, you thought of the perfect punchline. It's better than what I had. Let's go with that. And you can tell that he just fostered that type of environment. You could see him at the rewrite table hashing out punchlines to a Judy Blume sketch that John Malkovich was in. So it's just a really neat peek into that process, and just Seth as a boss. And from what Taryn said, it did come through in that brief little peek into that week's episode, that John Malkovich episode that James Franco followed around. I think Taryn, he can obviously speak on that given how close he worked with Seth, but you can really feel that. And I think it comes through on the air too. I think it comes through in the tone of the show. I think there was a noticeable difference in the tone of the show from before Seth was the head writer to after he took over. I think there was a good balance between clever humor and big characters, and I think we can thank Seth definitely for a lot of that. So right now Sammy, you're talking to SNL Hall of Fame voters right now. So what would you tell them is your strongest case as far as including Seth Meyers into the SNL Hall of Fame as a writer?
Yeah, so if you take a look at the entire history of the show, we've almost been on this journey with SNL for 50 years. So many casts have come and gone, but I think it's pretty universal that people look at that era between 2006 and 2012, 2013 as one of the golden eras of the show, and probably the best the show has been in a long time at that point. And so the person that is obviously each individual cast member contributed to that, but the person behind the scenes that was bringing the best out of everybody was Seth Meyers. He fostered this environment that allowed for people to be creative and collaborate with each other and make people win, make everybody on the show win, and kind of foster this environment that led to good comedy. And you think about all of the cast members and characters that came out from that era, you have to put Seth Meyers you have to give Seth Meyers his flowers for, that time. And, not only that, but you think about his time on Update, one of the longest tenured Update anchors. And, that is the portion of the show that is very heavily tied to writing and being a head writer. So that is just another feather in his cap there. And even we didn't even get into the kind of political humor that he's continued to do on late night with Seth Meyers. But, he is the person that was kind of behind a lot of the 2008 coverage. He was the head writer at that time. And, the Sarah Palin sketches at that time were huge. And I think that, along with Lonely Island, were things that were super viral on the show at that time and became super popular and kind of gave the show another life. And I think you have to give Seth Meyers the credit for all of that. And I think as a head writer on the show, he certainly deserves that spot in the Hall of Fame.
All right, thank you so much, Thomas Sena and Sammy K. That was a lovely bit of discussion there between the two of you. I learned a lot, and I think you've really helped me solidify my stance and help me, sort of cement where I'm at with Seth Meyers. Because if I look at my ballot, there's 31 names on it. I've got to choose up to 15. I'm going to choose the whole 15. I'm going to tell you right now. I'm going to use all 15 votes. And you give me 15, I'm going to use 15, especially when there's 31 names on the ballot. I've got about 5 or 6 locks. And then there's probably 7 that are like I'm unsure of. They deserve it, but I'm not 100% sure. So this really did a good thing for me in terms of helping me discover exactly why I should vote for Seth Meyers. So thank you very much. Let's listen to the submission of sketch that Sammy and Thomas have given us. In this case, it makes more sense to look at the body of work behind the update desk. And so what Thomas has done is curated an update segment that you can all enjoy right now and further understand the mind of Seth Meyers.
Weekend Update with Seth Meyers.
I'm Seth Meyers, and here are tonight's top stories. German sex educators plan to launch a spray-on condom. It's expected to sell much better than last year's iron-on condom. O.J. Simpson's trial for kidnapping, armed robbery, and assault with a deadly weapon started Monday. Man, you've lived a crazy life when a trial for kidnapping, armed robbery, and assault isn't your most interesting trial. A recent survey of 25 European countries revealed that Frenchmen have the longest penises with an average length of 15.48 centimeters. Luckily, that does not make me feel bad because I do not understand the metric system. Tony Danza has begun work on a new A&E series in which he will spend a year teaching 10th grade English at a New York City school. The network is already preparing a spin-off series in which a group of students repeat 10th grade English. Police in a small town in Texas spent 30 minutes recently chasing a loose goat. There's no video of the incident, but we did get a hold of an audio tape. It was announced this week that the cast of Glee will embark on a 7-day live concerts tour this spring, said your son who never got the hang of throwing a spiral. Blockbuster Video on Thursday filed for bankruptcy protection. Well, Blockbuster, seems our 8-year tug of war over Tango and Cash has reached its conclusion. High Times Magazine this week named Seth Rogen its Stoner of the Year for the second time, or as Rogen thinks of it, the first time. A new study suggests that tiny fish used in a trendy new type of pedicure in which they feed on the dead skin on people's feet contain a type of antibiotic-resistant bacteria that spreads infections. Though on the bright side, that would kill all the right people. According to poll data, President Obama's victory on Tuesday was due largely to his popularity with both college students and the unemployed. So basically, Obama became president the same way Budweiser became the king of beers. A man in Hawaii who came face-to-face with a shark while surfing survived by punching the shark in the face. Meanwhile, I saw a cockroach in my bathroom, and now I shower at the gym. For Weekend Update, I'm Seth Meyers. Good night.
That was great. That was phenomenal. Just some really great joke writing there. And the delivery certainly works for me as well. I want to thank Sammy K from the SNL Network for joining us this week. I, of course, want to thank our colleagues Thomas Sena and Matt Ardill for their hard work as well. It's been a pleasure, and we look forward to next week when we talk about Paul Rudd in the SNL Hall of Fame. So join us, won't you? We'll talk to you then. Until next time, as you're walking past the Weekend Update exhibit, would you do me a favor and turn out the lights? Because the SNL Hall of Fame is now closed.
Thanks for listening to the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. Make sure to rate, review, share, and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media at SNLHOF. This is Doug Denant saying, see you next week.
To podcasts and such.